Hello friends, in the last session we have seen what is an exception and when exception occurs in your application, what happens and how it terminates the execution of your application abnormally, and how the exception object flows from one method to another method, and finally how it goes to the JVM and what JVM does and what default exception handler of JVM does and why it terminates your execution, right? So when exception is there in your application, then application execution is going to be terminated abnormally. So and what exactly exception is, that also we have discussed in the last session very clearly. Now here we are going to see if exception is there when you want to continue the execution of your application, then what you have to do is you have to handle the exception, right? So handling exception. handling exception. Handling exception, right? And when you want to handle an exception in your application, then you have to use a combination of try and from try block from here, and this is a catch block, and some arguments here you have to define, and this is catch block, right? A combination of try block and catch block. And you can have multiple catch blocks, right? Multiple catch blocks you can have. They're going to see later. And you can have also a finally block, right? So to handle the exception in Java, you have try, catch, and finally. Finally is optional. Currently we are not going to see how to use finally block with try and catch. Now we are just going to see how to handle an exception by using try and catch, actually. Right, by using try and catch. So one try block can have one catch block, or it can have multiple catch blocks. Okay, it can have multiple catch blocks, but only one finally block is there. It is optional. Finally block is optional. If you want to use finally block, if you have the requirement, you can use the finally block, otherwise you can ignore. So finally block we are going to see separately how to use finally and what is the use of finally block. Currently we are going to see only try and catch. Okay, try and catch. So try and catch block is used to handle an exception to continue the execution of your application, right? If you are not handling the exception object, then it flows to the caller of the method, and finally it goes to the JVM, and JVM default handler handles the exception, and which terminates your execution of the program, because control also flows to the JVM along with the exception object. You have a class like this, say class ABC. You have a class ABC, and in that you have public static void and main method inside this string args, one-dimensional string array. And in that I have some statement like this, say SOP statement first, main method started, right? Main method started. Then statement is like this, say string str is equal to args of 0. Args of 0 is this one. It is a one-dimensional string array, right? From here the 0th index element I want to get and store into str, right? And how the 0th index element will come here? When you are executing this program ABC, you have to give the command line argument, and the command line arguments are going to store into this args, one-dimensional string array. And from there the first element, 0th index element, has to come and store into str, right? Then what I will do is say int x is equal to this str I will convert into integer type, and I will say here it is integer dot parse int of str, right? and then int y is equal to 10 divided by x, and one more SOP statement, print str, or finally I'll just print the y, I'll not print str, print y, and y is equal to plus y, result, and SOP statement main ends. Right, so this is a normal program. Now when you execute this ABC, you have to execute it like this. You have to say Java and ABC, and you have to give some command line argument here. So the command line argument I am giving like this: some ABC, hi, hello, 10, 20, and press enter. Right. So ABC is the class name which you are going to execute, which is having the main method, this, and these are the command line arguments. These command line arguments JVM has to collect, and JVM has to create a one-dimensional string array which address has to store into these args, and inside that array these elements should be collected by JVM and should store into that array. Right. Now when I will do like this, JVM collects this command line argument, store into one-dimensional string array, and the array reference is stored into this, and then it calls the main method in a static way. Because it is a static method, so JVM calls abc.main by giving that command line argument, say it is args or something, right, which is having one-dimensional string array, and that array is having these values. Right. Now control is inside the first statement here, so it prints here main function started. Main function started. Now in this, control is in this, and args of 0. What is the args of 0? Args of 0 value is ABC. This ABC has to store into str, so it allocates a local variable memory str, and this value is actually ABC. Now control is in the next statement. Str value should be converted to primitive type int x, right, and this is x memory allocated, and this value, this is of type int, so the size is 4, and this ABC should be converted to integer type and has to store into this, which is not possible because ABC is not a numeric value and it is not of type int, so it cannot convert that, and JVM cannot store into this. So this statement is going to give an exception here saying number format exception. Right. And if I do like this, say when I am executing this program, if I give these command line arguments, it is fine. But what if I don't give these arguments? If I just execute like this, Java and ABC class name, and press enter, no command line argument, then what JVM does is, when you will start JVM, okay, JVM is started, JVM will check ABC class, okay, ABC class is found. Inside the ABC class main method is there, yes, main method is there, then main method has to be called. But when JVM is calling main method is having an argument, one-dimensional string array. Now JVM has to create a one-dimensional string array, but what should be the length of that array? What should be the length of that array? So when JVM creates, previously here when JVM creates a one-dimensional array of type string, so JVM is creating s is equal to new string of size, and s is an array. So what should be the size of this? Size is how many elements, how many command line arguments you are providing, that should be the size of this. So here you are providing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements, so the size is 5. Right. Now what JVM will do? JVM will say s of 0 is equal to the first element. First element is ABC. Second element, s of 1 is equal to hi. Second element is stored. S of 2 is equal to hello. Third element is stored. S of 3 is equal to 10. 10 is stored. Fourth element, and s of 4 is equal to, say it is 20, and third element is stored into this array s. Right, before calling the main method, if it is in this way. And then JVM calls the main method abc.main, and here it should give a one-dimensional array, right? And the array now where it is storing these elements, element is stored into S, so here it gives S. Now when it starts executing the main method, inside the main method, first statement is main started okay, then args of 0. Args of 0 is actually S of 0, because this S is pointing to this args only, same. S and args is same. So the first element, this is ABC, ABC is going to store into str, right? But now when you will do without any command line argument, when you are doing like this, say Java and ABC, no command line argument, then what JVM will do? JVM will start and JVM will check in ABC main method is there or not. Okay, main method is there, and then JVM will call ABC dot main, ABC dot main. But main method is having again string type one-dimensional array argument, so JVM has to provide one-dimensional string array. So what JVM will do is JVM will create again one, say S, one-dimensional array with new string of size. What should be the size now? Previously the size was how many elements you are providing in the command line argument, that is the size of the created array, and here only it is going to store the element, and this JVM is providing as an argument when it is calling the main method. Now it is creating a string array, one-dimensional array, but you have not given any command line argument. So the size of this array is 0. Means 0 means you cannot store any element in this, and no element. But JVM is giving here S now to call the main method, and S is a empty character, empty string one-dimensional array. Size is 0, you cannot store any element in this. Now by using this, JVM calls ABC dot main and S. It gives this S inside this where size is 0, and main method starts execution, and it gives here main started okay, fine. And now when it comes here, args of 0, you don't have any element. The size of this string array is 0, you don't have any element in this. Now when you say 0th index you want to get, 0th index element is not available in this, so this statement gives an exception saying array index out of bounds exception, right? So in this example you have seen, you are giving the element, you are giving some element, but the elements are not convertible. Elements are not convertible to primitive type. So here you can get an exception, that is number format exception, right? Right, so this two scenario. This statement may give an exception, this statement also may give an exception. In certain cases, this statement may give exception. Like here, if you are not providing any command line argument, then array size is 0, no element in that, then this statement gives array index out of bounds exception. And in this case, you are giving the element, but the first element which you are giving is collecting at this point, so here no exception in this statement. But in the second statement, when control comes, the first element which is ABC cannot be converted into integer primitive type, so here you are going to get an exception, is called as number format exception. So in first case, first statement is not giving any exception, but second statement is giving exception. In second case, first statement is not first statement only giving an exception, then no chance to execute the second statement. So second statement is not going to give exception, because from here control goes to the caller method. So control is not coming at this point, so second statement is not going to give any exception, right? Assume both this statement is not giving exception. Now when both this statement will not give any exception, for example, if I write like this, Java and ABC, execute, but when executing I am giving here 0, 10, 20, hi, hello, something like this. Now when you will write this statement, when you will execute, what JVM does is, JVM checks ABC class, okay, ABC class is there, inside that main method is there, main method is there. Now it has to call ABC dot main. But when it is calling ABC dot main, it has to give a one-dimensional string type argument, one-dimensional string array argument to call the main method. So what JVM will do, before calling the main method, JVM creates a string array with new string of size. How many elements you are giving? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 elements. Right. it got this 5 element. And 5 elements, all the 5 elements is stored like this. Say s of 0 is, you are giving the 0 value here, this is 0, okay. Whatever value you give in from the command prompt, this is by default considered as string value, so I am writing here in double quote, so this is 0. And s of 1 is stored 10, 10 again is of type string. S of 2 is, say what you have given, 20, and like this remaining 2 also stores. And after that JVM calls abc dot main method with s, this is s, right. Now main method loaded and execution started. Now it gives here main started, first statement executed, okay, fine. Second statement, when control comes, first array args of 0 has to store into str. What is the args of 0? Args of 0 is 0, so 0 is stored into str, this is 0, no exception in this statement. Now when you come to the second statement, integer.parseInt of str, what is the str value? Str value is 0. 0 can be converted to integer type, and now x value is 0, so here also no exception. If no exception, then control flows to the next. Now 10 divided by 0, x means x value is 0. Now when you write here 10 divided by 0, you are going to get an exception here called arithmetic exception. Any value in Java cannot be divided by 0, okay. So this statement gives an exception here, arithmetic exception. When arithmetic exception comes in this place, then control will not flow to the next statement, because from here only control goes to the JVM and execution terminated. So in this example, what you have seen, these 3 statements may give an exception, that is depending on your input value what the user is supplying, but it may not give any exception also. How it is? For example, if I write something like this, abc dot Java and abc, the argument is 2, hi, hello, no comma in this, okay, no comma, space separation. So Java abc2 and hello. Now what will happen? JVM will start, it will check abc, okay, abc is found. Inside abc main is there or not? Main is there. So abc, it has to call abc dot main. But before calling the main, it has to give a one-dimensional string array in this. So before calling main, JVM creates a string array. Say s array is equal to new string of size. What is the size? Size, how many command line argument you are supplying? 1, 2 and 3. So size is 3. Now this command line argument has to be collected and should be stored into this s. So s of 0 is equal to 2. Same way, s of 1 is equal to hi, and s of 2 is equal to hello, right? 3 command line argument collected and stored into this array. Now when JVM will call abc.main, this array reference variable has to pass here as a argument, and it is done. Now main method starts execution. Now when control comes into the first statement, it prints main started, okay, fine, no problem. Then str value is args of 0. What is the args of 0 value? Args of 0 value is 2. 2 is going to store into this. This is 2 is stored. Then control comes to the next statement. No exception here. Control comes to the next statement, and this gives here 2 has to be converted to integer type. It is fine, no problem. 2 is converted. So no exception. Again control flows to the next statement, and it comes here. It has to give 10 divided by 2. 10 divided by 2 is perfectly okay. So it gives here 5, right? And now print y is 5. No exception in this statement, and main ends. So the program execution completed successfully. No exception came in this. But we have seen that these 3 statements may give exception in some cases, and that is depending on the user input. In first case, user is giving input with the command line argument, but this is not convertible, so you are going to get number format exception with this statement. In the second case, user is not supplying any command line argument, then here this is not going to get any value because array size will be 0, and you are going to get here array index out of bounds exception. In third case, User is supplying value, but the first element is 0. If the first element is 0, then this x value becomes 0, and 10 cannot be divided by 0, so here you are going to get a number format exception, right? And in the fourth case, this is fourth case, here no exception because this command line argument is perfectly alright. So in this case, in the fourth case 4, program is going to execute successfully without giving any exception, right? So this is exception, this is exception, this is also exception, right? But in the fourth case, no exception, it is going to execute successfully. But you notice here, very important point is, in any case, two exception cannot come together, right? Two exception cannot come together. Why? Because if the first statement gives exception here, from here only the exception is not handled and it goes to the JVM, remaining is not going to execute. These two are not executing at all, so no exception, no chance to give any exception. If this second statement is not giving any exception, so I'll write a line number here. This is 1, 2, and 2, and this is 3, 4, 5, and this is 6. Now when line number 2 is not giving any exception, from number 2 only control flows to the JVM along with the exception object, and remaining 3, 4, 5 and 6 is not going to be executed, so remaining exception no chance to get. If number 2 is not giving any exception, then line number 3 may give an exception. If line number 3 gives any exception, from this point the exception object moves to the JVM and remaining statement is not going to execute, so remaining statement cannot give any exception, right? If 3 is not giving any exception, then control flows to line number 4, and 4 may give an exception, which is arithmetic exception. If 4 is not giving any exception, then control flows to this and this, and these two statements no chance to give any exception. Same way, statement 1 no chance to give any exception. So in this program, line number 2, 3 and 4 can give some exception, that is depending on your input, or it may not give exception also, that is also depending on your input, what you are giving. If I give like this, then no exception. So the statement which may give some exception, those statements you have to put inside try and catch to handle the exception. If first statement line number 2 gives an exception, the exception object will be of type array index out of bounds exception. So I need to put line number 3 in a try and catch. If line number 3 is giving an exception, then the exception will be number format exception type, and then line number 3 also should be in a try and catch. If 3 is not giving, okay, line number 4 may give an exception, and if line number 4 gives exception, then that exception will be of array arithmetic exception. So line number 4 also should be placed inside a try and catch. So here 3 statements we have, 2, 3 and 4 should be placed inside a try and catch block. So in the so what we will do here is, I'll take another example, and there I'll put this in try and catch. So suppose I have class ABC, in that public static void and main method, and inside the main method string type args, one-dimensional array, right? And in that similarly I have a SOP statement. This is main started, right? Then I have say string s is equal to args of 0, but this statement may give an exception, and if it is giving an exception, then I have to hold that exception. So what I will do is put that statement in try, the statement which may give an exception, and if it is actually giving the exception, it may not give also, right? If you give the command line argument correctly, then this statement may not give an exception. If it is not giving an exception, then no problem, it is fine, it executes successfully, control flows to the next statement. But if it is giving an exception, then exception will be of type array index out of bounds exception at this point, right? So if it is giving actually an exception, I have to use here a catch block, and inside the catch block is from here, the block reference is from this place to this, right? So this is the catch block. With try, one catch block. Now what is the use of catch block? Try block is used to put the statements which may give an exception. The statements which may give an exception, those statements should be placed inside the try block. Okay. What is the use of catch block? Catch block is, if the statements which are inside the try block, if those statements are actually giving an exception, then that exception object should not move to the caller, it should be handled here. And how we will handle? You have to, what is handling means, you have to take a reference variable somewhere, and when this statement gives an exception, this reference variable which is already designed should immediately start pointing to this, so that it cannot move to the caller method, right? That is handling. Handling means the statement which may gives an exception, and if it is actually giving the exception, that exception object should be handled here itself. It should not be allowed to move to the caller function. And how will you handle it? You should define a reference variable, and the reference variable should start pointing to that object immediately when the exception object is raised. So for that, what you have to do, your reference variable should be already ready before executing this statement, right? So where you will define this reference variable? This reference variable should be defined inside the catch, and it is in this place, right? Inside the catch, here you have to define the reference variable, which is going to hold the exception object which may generate from this place, right? So how will you define the reference variable, and what should be the type? What should be the type of the reference variable which you are going to define? So the reference variable name, I'll give something E. It is E because it is going to point to an object which is of type exception. So I'm giving the reference variable name E. But a variable declaration is, you have to give the type. Variable declaration is data type, you have to mention data type and the variable name. This is the syntax to declare a variable. Now if I want to declare int x is a variable which is of type int. If I write float f is a variable which is of type float. Same way, here the variable is E, but that should be of which type? What this E is going to do, E is going to point to an object which may generate by this statement. And here, before only you have to know, if this statement generates an exception, then which type of exception this statement may generate. That you have to know before only. So currently here you can understand that if this statement gives an exception, then that exception will be of type array index out of bounds exception. Other than this, there is no other chance that this statement may give an exception. So if from this statement, if you get any exception, that exception object will be definitely of type array index out of bounds exception. So by that only you have to decide, and you have to say here, okay, this E is of type array index out of bound exception. This E is of type array index out of bounds exception, right? Now if this statement give any exception, then this E, which is a reference variable, is ready, and that is immediately, say, you can say here this is E, that immediately start pointing to this object, and it is not going to flow to the caller method, right? So this is handling. This part you have to remember very clearly, right? This part you have to remember very clearly. Here this reference variable declaration inside the catch block, say this is try block from here till this, and whatever statements, you can have multiple statements in this place, whatever statements may give an exception, those statements you should place inside the try block, right? Then what is in catch block? Catch. Inside the catch block is from this, from here till this. And at this place here you have to declare a reference variable of some particular type. Now this reference variable should be of which type? Reference variable should be of type, the type of this reference variable should be of same type to which object this reference variable is going to point. If I declare a reference variable a1, and if it is going to point to an object of type this, so this is a1 pointing to this object, then object should be of type abc, then a1 also should be of type abc only. So a1 type and the object type where it is pointing both must be exactly same type. Now here when I am declaring e type should be exactly same type where exactly same type of the exception type object which may generate from these statements. If these statements generating any exception in this, then that exception object will be of which type? That type should be the type of e, so that e can point to that object. So here if I say it is array index out of bound exception type, then these statements what you are writing inside the try block, then try block statements if generating any exception, then that exception should be of type array index out of bound exception, and then e is also of type array index out of bounds exception, then that e can start pointing to that object. But assume it is like this. Here you have defined e is of type array index out of bounds exception, but the statement which are there inside the try block that are giving an exception which is of type number format exception. The exception object which is generated in try block is number format exception, and the exception reference variable which you have declared here is of type array index out of bound exception. Now object is of type number format exception, reference variable is of type array index out of bound exception. Then this reference variable cannot point to this object. It cannot, it is not of same type. Then what will happen? This exception object is not handled, and it again flows to the caller function. So you should be very careful here in this case that the reference variable which you are declaring inside the catch block must be exactly same type to the exception object which may generate from the try block. If it is not exactly same type, then this reference variable cannot point to that object, and if it is not pointing to that object, if it is failed to point to that object, then exception object is not handled, and it starts flowing to the caller function. Even when you have the try and catch block, the exception object will not be handled, right? So this is one try and catch. I have written array index out of bounds exception because I know that if this statement throws an exception, there will be definitely array index out of bounds exception. So the reference variable is this. And after handling this, now if try block gives any exception, then this e automatically starts pointing to this. Now when control is at this point, and this got an exception, right? Now what will happen? This object address should assign it to e. Right, object is of type e, okay, type is matched, so object address should assign into e. So control, from this statement control comes into catch block here, and it starts flowing inside the catch block. Here you can write multiple statements, right? So what I will do here is I will print here one SOP statement e, what actually e is holding, that I want to check, and I will print here one message. I will give that enter command line argument. This is a message to the user, right? So from this discussion we understood that if try block gives an exception and corresponding catch block is available to hold the exception, then when try block gives exception, the exception object is going to be handled by the catch block reference variable is this, and along with that control comes to the catch block. Okay, control comes to the catch block. But if try block is not giving any exception, then will the control come into catch? It will never come. Why it will not come? Because here no exception is generated. Then e is not going to point any object, so control is not flowing into catch block, and catch block is not going to execute. So here one more important point you have to remember very clearly, that if try block is not giving any exception, then catch block is not going to execute because the control is not going to flow into the catch block, right? And if try block is giving an exception and that exception object is of type which you have defined inside the catch block, then control will flow to that, because that E is going to point to that object, and then the catch block is going to execute. If the try block is giving some exception and catch block, this reference variable is of some different type, then in that case what will happen? If try block is giving an exception but corresponding catch block is not there, catch block is different, then that exception object is not going to handle by this reference variable and object flows to the caller function. Then in that case control is not going to execute into catch block, right? So three important points you have to remember here. First one is if try block is not giving any exception, catch block is not going to execute. Second one, if try block gives an exception and the catch block is also of same type, then catch block will hold that exception, and along with that control comes into catch block and catch block is going to execute. This is line number 2. Point number 2. Point number 3 you have to remember is if try block is giving an exception and it is not handled by the catch block because this type is different, then exception object moves to the caller function and that is not going to be executed, and control catch block also is not executing, remaining all statement is not going to be executed. Next 4 important point is if try block is not giving any exception at all, then control is not going to come into catch block, it directly comes out of after the catch block. Here any other statements are there, those are going to be executed. So these 4 points you have to remember very clearly. Now in previous example, here what we have seen is in this. So we have 3 statements here. Statement 1, no exception, okay. 2 may give an exception, 3 may give an exception, and 4 may give an exception. So 2, 3 and 4, all these we have to put into try and catch. So what you have to do here is I'll write here, so this is class ABC, and in that you have public static void and main method, string type args. In that first statement will not give any exception, so simple SAP statement main started, right? Then next statement is string s is equal to args of 0, right? Now in this statement may gives an exception, so what I have to do is I have to put in try and catch. In catch, which type of exception I have to handle? It should be array index out of bound exception. E is the reference variable which is going to point into this if this gives an exception, right? And here what I'll do is I'll print E. And now I'll write SOP statement here that enter 1 command line argument, right? Now the next statement, so this is statement 1, assume, and this is statement 2. Statement 3, what we did here is say int x is equal to integer dot parse int of s, percent of s. Now if I declare s here, then this becomes actually a local variable for this try and catch, so it will not be accessible at this point, right? So what I have to do is I have to put the s outside so that it can be accessible throughout the main method. So I will this s I will not declare here, s I will declare outside, and in this So S is not here. S is outside. After the main here only, immediately say outside the try and catch, and here it is a string. Say S, right? First time. This is S. Outside the try and catch. And now the next statement is X is equal to integer dot parse int of S, right? So this statement also gives the X should be again outside. Here I am writing X and Y, two variables declared, right? So in that again try, and this also having catch. So this is exception. Sorry, it is not exception. It should be if this statement gives exception, then exception will be of which type? This exception will be of type number format exception. If this statement gives exception, then exception will be of type number format exception. So in this catch block, I am declaring the reference variable of type number format exception, and again here I am printing SOP statement E, and I am printing SOP statement of it is when this statement gives an exception, when the value is in the command line argument is there. In command line argument, 0th index value is there, means this statement is not giving any exception, then control comes into this, right? And when it gives value is there, but the value is not convertible, so in that case what will happen here is it will give here the exception is number format exception. So I will tell here that enter, the message should be enter int value as command line argument, right? Okay, so this is done. Now statement 2 and statement 3. Statement 3 gives exception, that is number format exception, and that is handled here. Now next statement is if statement 4 should be y is equal to 10 divided by x, right? Now this also may give an exception, this also try, and in that catch. And if this statement gives an exception, then it will give arithmetic exception E. E is of type arithmetic exception. One more important point we remember here, this E is a local variable from this place till this. Same way here, this E is a local variable from here till this. It is similar like a method argument or constructor argument how you are giving, right? In the same way. So this E is not going to be this one, it is different. This is a local variable for this block, this is a local variable for this catch block, right? So here also again I am printing E, and I will print here SOP statement, and when this statement gives exception, this statement gives exception when x value is there but the value is 0. So I will give here enter non-zero int type value as command line argument, right? And last SOP statement, this is main ends, and this is the program over. So the statement which may give an exception, all those statements we have placed inside a try and catch. Now what will be the execution flow in this? What is the execution flow in this? Assume I am executing it like this. When I will execute, say I am executing, execution flow is here. When I will execute Java and ABC, just Java and ABC, when I will write like this, then what will happen? JVM will check, JVM will start, okay, JVM started, it checks ABC is there or not, okay, say ABC is there. If ABC is there, main method check. Okay, main method is also available. Now it has to load ABC. ABC is loaded, and then it has to call main. But before calling main, it has to create a one-dimensional argument, right? One-dimensional string array for the command line argument. But you are not giving any command line argument in this place, so it creates a string S is equal to new string of empty 0 0. 0 means you cannot store any element, and that S it gives here as an argument, right? Now main method started execution, and control is at the first statement. Control is here, and it prints here main started. Main started, right? Done. Then control comes into try. Okay, inside the try block, the statement is this: S should be initialized with args of 0. But args of 0, what is the value? Args of 0 is not at all available, because here the size is 0. Args of 0 is not available. So what you have to do is, args of 0 is not available. So what JVM will do here, it will generate an event, and the event will find out what is the corresponding class, and the class is array index out of bound exception object generated. Now what this E will do, E from this, it starts pointing to this object immediately, and here the value is 1040. This assigns here 1040. Exception object is handled because this is of type array index out of bounds exception, and this object is also of type array index out of bounds exception. So exception object handled. If exception object is handled, then control of exception object cannot flow now, and control is inside the catch here. Now it flows inside the catch block, right? Inside the catch block. And when it is inside the catch block, it prints E. What is E? E is pointing to an object which is of type array index out of bounds exception. Now you know, when you print any reference variable, which is pointing to an object, what it gives? It gives the class name. If toString method is already overridden, right? So here it will give the class name. It is array index out of bound exception, something class name it will give, right? Array index out of bounds exception, right? It gives something like this. Now control comes into this. It prints a message here: enter one command line argument, right? This message is over. Then catch block execution is over. And when catch block is executing, because it has an exception in try block, so catch block is executing, right? Then exception is handled, so control executes. Control remains here only, and it continues the execution, and it goes to the next statement here. X is integer of parse int. But what is S value? S value is not there, so S value, as you might consider here, it is null, and default X is 0 and default Y is, I will consider 0. Now when S value is null is trying to convert into integer type. Null value cannot be converted into integer type. So this statement JVM again cannot evaluate, because S remains null, and here it generates an exception object, and this exception object is of type number format exception. Now in try block, exception is generated, and that is number format exception. Now in catch block, try block, when it is having an exception object raised, then it checks, JVM checks, is there any catch block which can have that which is having the reference variable of this type. Okay, catch block is there, and catch block E is there. It is a local variable here. That E immediately starts pointing to this, and the address of 1040, this points here 1040, right? Now exception is there in try block, which is raised in try, and JVM found the corresponding catch block, and catch block E reference variable is of same type number format exception only, so E immediately starts pointing to that object, and now control comes into catch, right? Again it prints E. Now what this E is of type number format exception, so it gives here this is number format exception, class name it gives, okay? And then control is in this paint, it is enter int value as, it prints here enter int value as command line argument, right? Now exception raised in second try also, and it is handled by E. Now what will happen? Because exception is handled here, so it continues the execution. It will not stop here, it continues, and when it is continuing, now control comes into this try, right? Control comes into this try. Y is 10 divided by x, and what is x value? We have given x hardcode value is 0. So again this statement also given exception, and this exception is now generates an event, find out the class if the exception is generated, and this exception here is of type arithmetic exception, right? So exception is found in try. Now exception object is supposed to flow to the caller, but it will not flow. First it will check if catch block is there or not. Okay, catch block is there. In the catch block, corresponding type reference variable is there or not. Okay, it is there. Now this E is ready. Immediately E starts pointing to this object. Say it is 1080, and this address here 1080, right? Now because exception is there in try and corresponding catch block is also found, then control, and it is handled, so control comes into this, and it prints here E. E is of type arithmetic exception, right? And now control comes here, enter non-zero int type value as command line argument and something, right? And exception is there and it is handled successfully, and so it comes into main ends. So 3 exception is there in your application now. 3 exception is there, but all the exceptions was handled correctly, successfully. So execution flow is continued till main ends, and this scenario is when in command line argument no command line argument is supplied. So string array is empty at that time, nothing is there. Now again we will execute this program only, and we will have a value like this. Suppose we will have a value like this. Now say I am executing in this way. Again I am writing here Java and ABC, and the value I am giving here hi, hello and 10. This I am executing now. First execution, no command line argument. Second execution, you have 3 command line argument, right? Now what will happen in this case? When you will write this statement, then main method class loaded, main method is started, and JVM calls abc.main. But before calling, JVM has to create a command line argument, one-dimensional array, and it has created, suppose something like this. This is S, and it is pointing to one-dimensional string array, and the values you have are hi, hello and 10, right? So this S is supplied here. S is supplied. Now it is fine. Main method is called in a static way, and now control is here. It prints main started. It prints here main started. Main started, right? Main started. Now after main started, it should come into try, and in this point args of 0 should store into S. What is args of 0? Args of 0 is high, so high is going to store into S, and this statement now not getting any exception. It is a valid argument and it has the argument also, so the value args of 0, which is high, is going to store into S, and it is successful, right? When this try block is not giving, here it is important, you have to notice try block is not having any exception at all. If exception is not there in try block, then catch block is not going to execute. Means control will not enter at all inside the catch block, right? Now this is successful, this statement is successful, no exception, so no catch block execution also. Then control directly comes to the next try block, and it is here now. integer dot parseInt of s. Now what is s value? S value is high. High should be converted into integer type, which is not possible. Again JVM raised the event, it got the exception. Exception is number format exception, and then E is already ready at that time again, and E immediately starts pointing into this. Now because exception is there in this try block, so exception is handled by this catch block and control comes into catch. So it prints here E, and this E is number format exception. Right. Then next one also executes, and here it is enter into value as command line argument. Right. Now exception is try block is there and catch block executed, and control exception is handled also, so control comes into next. Y is equal to 10 divided by 0, 10 divided by x, but x value here it is not initialized because it got an exception, so this was not evaluated successfully, so x did not get any value. Instead of that, it executed the catch block. Now when you will say here 10 divided by 0 in this, x value remains 0, which is hard-coded value. So when you will write 10 divided by 0, again this statement execution is also not successful. Again this generates an exception, and this exception again is of type arithmetic exception, and this is E again. E starts pointing to this. So this was again not executed successfully. Now control is in a catch block, it prints E here, and the E is, say, it is arithmetic exception E, complete name, right, fully qualified name. And then control is here, it prints enter non-zero into type value as command line argument. Then exception is there in try and it is handled, so it continues, and it is main ends minutes. Right. So this is the execution flow. Now you notice here that in this, when you have executed with hi and hello, then first try block has not give any exception, no exception, so first catch block was not executed because it got the value. Now second try block, statement 3, got an exception because s value is high and which was not possible to convert to integer type, so it gave an exception, number format exception, and which is handled in catch. Right, so catch block is executed. Now in this again, fourth statement, again this was not evaluated successfully because x value is 0 and 10 divided by 0 is not possible, so again with the exception, again corresponding catch block is executed, and finally main ends executed successfully. Now again if I execute this in this way, suppose I'll write this here. So again when I'm executing this, I'm executing like this. Now again when I am executing, I'll write Java and ABC. I'll give the command line argument, but the command line argument is 0, hi and hello, and press enter. When you do like this, then JVM started and JVM called abc.main. But before calling main method, JVM creates a string one-dimensional array which is pointing to these, and the values are 0, hi and hello. Right, and this as is provided here to call the main method. Now control is inside the main, it is here. So it prints main started, and then it comes into try block. In try blocks, args of 0 should store into S. What is args of 0? Args of 0 is 0. Now S value is 0, right? S value is 0. So this try block has not given any exception and 0 is successfully stored into S, so this is not going to execute, no catch block execution. Now from the try block, control directly comes to the next try block, this X, and what it has to do, now S value is 0 and 0 is converting to integer type. It is fine successfully, no problem. 0 is convertible to integer type, so X value gets 0 after conversion. X value gets 0. So here also no exception, so catch block is also not going to execute, right? So this is also catch block is not going to execute. Then control comes, this is not executed, so control comes into this statement. But what is the X value here? X value is 0. Control comes into this 10 divided by 0. 10 divided by 0 is not possible, so what it will do is generate an event and get the exception object, and exception object is arithmetic exception, right? Arithmetic exception. Now arithmetic exception, you have here the E, which is of type arithmetic exception only, and this E immediately starts pointing to this object. This is E, it starts pointing to this object, right? An exception is there, and so it is handled by the catch block. So this is going to print here, it control is going to come into catch block and it is print here, it is arithmetic exception fully qualified name, and it gives here a message, enter non-zero int value, int type value as command line argument, right? So it is done in this way. Now this is done. Now it is handled, it is okay, and now control goes to the last statement. It is executed this one also, and now control is here, it is main ends, right? Main ends. Now here what you have to notice, for the command line argument we have given here 0, hi and hello. First statement, this execution args of 0 stored into S is successful because it is having a value which is 0, so catch block is not executed. Second try block, 0 value of S is convertible to integer type and it is converted, so this try block also has not given any exception, so this catch block is also not executed. In third case here, X value is 0 and 10 divided by 0 is not possible, so this is giving an exception, and which is handled by corresponding catch block, and this is executing the catch block, and finally main end, that is also going to execute successfully, no problem. Okay, now if I execute it like this, suppose if I execute Java and ABC with 2, hi and hello, right, then JVM calls ABC dot me. It has to give here one S, and that S is, so it is creating S, one type string type argument, giving the value here 2, hi and hello, right? Then main method start execution, and control is at this point, and it prints here main started. Now first statement, control is in try block, and it is in try block, and it comes into this. So args of 0 should store into S. Args of 0 value you have given here 2, and 2 store into S, this is 2. No exception. So no exception means no catch block execution, it is not executed. Now control comes into next try block here. S value should convert into integer type. What is S value? S value here you have given 2, and that converts into X. Now X value is 2. It is also okay, no problem. In this try also no exception, so no catch execution. Now when it goes to the next, all this is successful. Now when it goes to the next, this no catch execution, it comes into this. Now x value is 2. 2 divided by 10 divided by 2, that is also fine, no exception, and y gets 5 as a result, and that is okay. So no catch block execution, and finally it comes into main, and it is main ends. So this catch is also not going to execute, right? So here it gives main ends, main ends. So this is the execution flow of this program, and here importantly you have to notice that what value when you are giving, and how try and catch block is behaving in this, right? So in the first case, what we have noticed here is okay. Now let's try that with an example with the program in the Eclipse. So I'll write the program here. Say it is main method, and in that I'm having main function started, right? Then I'll take string s is equal to args of 0, right? Args of 0. Then int x is equal to integer dot parse int of s. Then int y is equal to 10 divided by x, right? And finally I'll print here y, and I want to print this is main ends, right? So currently I'll not give any command line argument in this, I'll just run it directly. So what should happen? Main is started, okay, then it will come into this. It is getting array index out of bounds exception. Object is generated. From here only exception object should move to the caller, and currently the caller of the main method is JVM, so it moves to the JVM. Remaining statement no chance to execute, right? So just run it. It is main is started and array index out of bounds exception, right? So now what I want to do is these three statements may give exception, so this I'll put in try and catch. So this is try, and in that catch, and this exception should be of type, here it is array index out of bounds exception e. This is variable declaration, right? And I'll print here e, and I'm printing enter one command line argument. This is the message, right? So first exception is handled. Now if the second statement gives exception, then this will say again try and catch, and this, if this gives an exception, it will be number format exception. So this is number format exception e, and again I'll print here e, and I'm printing enter int type value as command line argument. Then this statement also may give an exception. So for this again try and one more catch. This is of type arithmetic exception. If this gives an exception, then that will be arithmetic exception. So this is e again I'm printing e and printing enter non-zero int value as command line argument, right? So this is done, fine. And I'm printing y. Now it is having some exceptions because this y here it is local, I cannot use it here. Same with this s is local for this location, I cannot use there outside. So what I'll do, I'll declare here only before s is null first time, and int x is equal to 0 and y is also 0, right? It is not here, it is just use. This. Now it is Perfect. Right, now if I run without any value, then main is started, okay, fine. And when it comes into this, no value command line argument is found, so exception will be raised. Exception is handled with this, so it will print here E and enter one command line argument is the message. Since exception is handled, so continues execution here, S. S cannot convert into integer type because currently S value is null. So again exception raised here, and it gives, it is going to handle with this, and E is printing, which will print number format exception, and again this also printed, right? It is handled by catch. Again it is continued because the exception is handled, it comes here, and X value is remains 0 here, which you have given, and it gives here again arithmetic exception and enter one non-zero int value as command line argument. Now it comes into this Y value remains 0, it prints 0, and then main ends, right? And run it. It is this. Main is started, array index out of bounds exception, and enter one command line argument. Number format exception, enter one int type command line argument. Arithmetic exception, enter one non-zero int values command line argument, and 0 and main ends. Now if I give one command line argument, and that command line argument is of type string, so to give the command line argument in this, you have to say here run and run configuration. In the run configuration, you go to arguments, and here you have to supply the command line argument. So here the argument I'll give here, say hello, hi, 10, something like this, right? So the first argument here we have given here as hello. After giving this argument, apply and run. When you say like this is hello is stored in this because it has the value, so it is not going to give any exception, and catch block is not going to execute. So it will give here main is started, and then it comes here S value is hello. Hello cannot convert into integer type, so this gives here number format exception, integer type, and again remaining continues, and you see this output, it is this main is started, number format exception, enter one command line value, arithmetic exception, and this, right? So this is main ends. Now if I give a value, but the value is of 0, if it is 0, this is okay, it has the value, this is also okay. So no, this catch block is not going to execute, even this catch is also not going to execute, but it comes here, and this get an exception, and this catch block is going to execute. So again I'll say run and run configuration, and here the first value is, say it is 0. Apply and run, right? This last catch block is executing. Now if I am not getting 0, if I give here say run and run configuration, I'll give the first argument as 2, then no exception, it is okay, apply and run, it is fine, right? So this is the execution flow when you are having try and catch. But in this what we did, for each statement we have taken one try and one catch separately, and what we can do is all these statements which you are putting inside a try can be placed in the same try block, in one try block, and for the same try block I can take multiple catch blocks at a time, okay? One try block, multiple catch block, and in that one try block I am going to place all the statements, this one and this one and this one, and in one try block all these statements, and for that all statement which may give some exceptions, corresponding catch block we are going to define with one try and multiple catch blocks in the next tutorial, okay? In that we are going to see that implementation, again execution flow, and how it works. So thanks for watching my video. Please subscribe for more videos.